On a quiet morning in 2019, inside a small-town American diner, an encounter took place that would spark one of the most shocking corruption investigations in recent history. A group of police officers walked in, ordered coffee, and noticed an elderly black man sitting alone in a corner booth. He was homeless, his clothes worn, his military cap resting beside him. To them, he looked powerless, an easy target. But what these officers didn't realize was that this man was no ordinary veteran. His name was Colonel James Everett, a decorated war hero, intelligence asset, and the very person who would soon expose their department's darkest secrets. This is the Everett Case. Please comment where you're watching us from, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notification. Witnesses say the diner was unusually tense that morning. The elderly man sat quietly, drinking coffee he could barely afford. A waitress, who later testified under oath, recalled that he had thanked her 3 times for simply refilling his cup. Then, the officers approached. According to eyewitness accounts, one officer kicked the man's cap from the table to the floor, sneering, "Pick it up, old man. You don't deserve to wear that." The veteran didn't respond. His silence seemed to fuel their arrogance. Another officer leaned down, taunting him. "But you're just another washed-up nobody, begging scraps. Men like you don't get respect anymore." The diner froze. Customers looked away. The waitress held back tears. No one dared intervene. What those officers didn't know was that every second of their humiliation was being captured by a teenage customer live streaming from her phone. Within hours, the video would go viral. The man they targeted was James Everett, 67 years old. On paper, he was just another homeless veteran. But Everett's record told a very different story. He was a decorated colonel, a combat strategist who had led special operations overseas, and a man still quietly connected to intelligence channels. What drove him into that diner that morning wasn't just hunger. It was an investigation. Unbeknownst to the officers, Everett had been collecting evidence for months. Photographs, financial records, secret recordings linking their department to systemic racial profiling, falsified arrest reports, and even ties to organized money laundering. They thought he was powerless. In reality, he was the one man who had the power to destroy them. As the officers mocked him, Everett finally spoke. His voice was calm, steady, almost frighteningly controlled. He said, "I wore that uniform so men like you could hide behind a badge. But don't mistake silence for weakness." The officers laughed. One shoved him against the booth. The waitress screamed, but Everett didn't fight back. He simply reached into his duffel bag and placed something on the table. Witnesses recall the silence that followed. It was an identification card. Official, military grade. His name in bold letters, Colonel James Everett. And in that moment, the officer's confidence cracked. Eyewitnesses said one officer immediately stepped back, his face pale. Another muttered, oh God." Within seconds, the mood shifted. The men who thought they were humiliating nobody suddenly realized they had just assaulted a decorated U.S. military officer on camera, in public, and in front of dozens of witnesses. The video of the incident spread like wildfire. By nightfall, it had over 3 million views. Headlines across the country read, "Homeless veteran humiliated by local cops. Turns out he's a colonel." Police harassment case explodes into national scandal. Civil rights groups demanded action. The Department of Justice sent inquiries. But the real explosion came days later when Everett revealed the evidence he had been quietly collecting. Among his files were dozens of falsified arrest records targeting black citizens, bank transfers showing suspicious payments to the police chief, photographs of senior officers meeting with powerful local officials, including a sitting U.S. senator. The harassment at the diner was no longer seen as an isolated act of racism. It was the tip of an iceberg of corruption that stretched from the streets all the way to the halls of power. One diner customer later said in an interview, "At first I was ashamed. None of us spoke up. But when he laid down that ID, I'll never forget the look on those officers' faces, like they were staring at their own careers ending right in front of them." Another witness, the teenage girl who streamed the video, told reporters, "People always say no one believes racism happens unless there's proof. Well, this time the whole world saw it live. Within a week, Internal Affairs had suspended the officers. Investigators hinted at federal charges including civil rights violations, abuse of authority, obstruction of justice, conspiracy, and racketeering. But the deeper investigators dug, the clearer it became. This wasn't about a few bad cops. This was about an entire system. By the time Colonel Everett walked into a congressional hearing 2 months later, the case had already shaken the town. But no one was prepared for what he revealed next. Behind the police chief stood a powerful senator. Behind the senator, an even darker network. The Everett case was no longer just a local crime. It was the beginning of a national reckoning. And just when Everett thought he was turning the tide, an anonymous thread arrived at his door. It read, "You should have stayed silent." To be continued in part 2. Please like, comment, subscribe, and turn on notification. Thanks for watching.